I'd like to see more confidence in and conversations coming from the single in the group, so that we do hear, and that comes out into the open, so that people behind us can see that that is a legitimate experience and grief that we go through, and it's not just having gone through, a procedure or trying, or that guarantees you a spot as a childless person, that you've gone through something as a single, into your grief is just as legitimate as the person next to you.
Welcome to the Full Stop Podcast, the Childless Community podcast with Michael Hughes, Berenice Smith and me, Sarah Lawrence. If you're new to this podcast, we're here to delve beneath the surface of the childless identity, to cover what's going on in the wider community and to look at the topics that really affect us. Our goal is to help and support those of you out in the community by sharing the stories and the voices that make up our narrative, so that you too can begin to find yours. We also aim to inform and educate those who aren't members of our community, so that they can begin to understand and support those people in their lives who are facing a life without children. In this episode, we were lucky enough to be joined by Penny Rabbits of the Childless Wanderer and Elaine Ritchie, who is a new voice in our community. We spoke to both Penny and Elaine about their experiences of being childless by circumstance, and as you'll hear, we didn't say much because both Penny and Elaine were both eloquent about their feelings and their thoughts about finding a voice within our community for those that haven't met partners. This was a powerful episode, so sit back, relax, as you listen to Penny and Elaine raise their voices for the unspoken majority in the childless community.
Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today. I was going to do an intro. I said to Michael, I had a thought about the intro, but we'll perhaps come back to that in a bit when I've warmed up, because my voice is a bit kind of croaky this morning. But thank you ever so much, and welcome to the Full Stop Podcast today. What episode are we on, Michael?
44. No.
45.
45.
This will be 45. I just edited 44 yesterday. That's right.
Yeah, that's just going to start. Christmas in July, isn't it? Really, sometimes. So one of the things that is important to us on the podcast is giving everybody an authentic voice, and to cover stuff that maybe we don't cover as presenters in how we live our lives. We are coupled, not together. Only in the podcast space, just to be clear on that one. But each of us have partners. And it's important to us that we are diverse, inclusive, and welcoming to all the stories in our community, because we're all capable of creating our own little mini bingos along the way, things that we want to avoid from the wider community who have children or who don't have children, who have chosen not to have children. We can also perhaps sometimes in our own spaces create those as well by not listening to all of the stories that come within the broad banner of childlessness. And it's an important part of our ethos on the Full Stop that we welcome everybody, and we can hand the Full Stop podcast over to anybody who wants to curate an episode of their own, but also to come to us with ideas and thoughts as to what they would like to talk about. And one of the biggest requests that came through in the last, actually since we've been going, I think, is single and childlessness, because single and childlessness is another part of our community that often doesn't get a voice, and it's important to allow that space. So we're really delighted to welcome Elaine and Penny onto the podcast this morning. Welcome to you both. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning and good evening, depending on your location for those that are down under or in the UK. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. So I was wondering, would we be able to start with introductions, just so we know who you are and our listeners can get to know you as well? Would that be okay? Who would like to go first? Who's feeling ready?
I'm happy to go. I came into this community probably early on in the COVID space, when things were closing down, at the beginning of closing down in Victoria, and we have since become, I think, the title in the world with the longest number of lockdown days, which not extremely happy to have lived through. And I also started my connection into this community as a couple. And I do want to talk a bit more about that, because I think it's really important, in the difference between my experience as a single. And I have, but over my years of dating years, I've been pretty much a fair 50-50 mixture of being coupled or single. But I have been single for the last year, and I have found it to be, having found this community and people who are a shared experience of not thinking that we would have one life, and then it not happening, that there was a real difference in who I heard with a single voice to who I heard with a coupled voice. And I could go down a whole path of conversation, but I'll finish talking about who I am. So what I did then was I've met someone else in that community, and we did start and put out a podcast into the world. And I started a group down under, the Childless and Child-Free Women in Australia and New Zealand, and just started building connection through, especially during a lockdown period. There was a lot more activity that happened online. I found you guys, I found the Full Stop podcast that I listened to. And in the last year in particular, I started creating a community with another friend of bringing women together in Melbourne, so that we did social events. And that's been, I think I've had probably an excessive 20 events that I've personally done. And so we probably had, between 30 and 40 events that have happened in the last year for just women in Melbourne who don't have children to come together. And it's so awesome. That we have this one thing in common, but it is more than that. There is a shared experience of how the rest of the world see us and feel about us, but we all know that, and we don't, and yet that's unspoken, but we can have conversations that are not focused around the children that we don't have. Instead, it's focused on the things that we do, and it's awesome, diverse conversation that happens. But even that has been the product of my becoming single in the last year, that I have dedicated so much more time to that sort of activity, and giving my time into it. So I'm a Kiwi. I moved here to Melbourne 20 years ago, but I did spend 7 years in the UK, so I can get some references. And I left because I really wanted the sunshine, to be honest. And I was meant to go back to New Zealand, but much to my mum's disappointment, I met someone and ended up here in Melbourne. So, that relationship did last a year, but yeah, it didn't last forever. That wasn't the end of my story. Anyway, that's me. So bits of me anyway.
Thanks, Penny. Thanks for sharing. What about yourself, Elaine?
So I feel pretty new to this community, to be honest, but I've been very warmly welcomed in by everybody. I am childless not by choice. I'm single not by choice. I had a hysterectomy 1 year ago, and I'm now 50, and I think I was all that time in denial. I was still believing that I would have a child, even though I was past my fertility years. So I also have no family. I was an only child. I have lost both my parents. My mum was an only child. My dad had one sister. She is still alive, but she's aging now, and she's child free. So a random Google search after my hysterectomy led me to Gateway Women, and that led me to the Full Stop podcast. So in my life, I'm a full-time urology oncology nurse specialist, and I'm a part-time Zumba instructor as well. So that's me.
Oh wow, thanks, Elaine. So it's so nice to have a new voice in the community then. It's like, it sounds like it's really fresh for you then. It's sort of getting out there, seeing what's available to you, and meeting up with people.
Yeah, I have grabbed it, I think, with both hands as well. I've done a lot of in-face meetups, which have been great. Who joined most of the Gateway online things that have been going on, and I feel really a real part of the community. I've never met women like it, so I'm really happy to be here.
I really love that, actually, Elaine, that you've embraced the community, because I think that matters so much, that when we create different things, different people doing different things, to actually have that feedback and to be so warmly welcomed from you as well, because we obviously appear in your space, we all do, and to be so warmly received by you is just such a welcoming thing. And Penny as well, you've both been such cheerleaders for the podcast and for the Full Stop over the time that we've known both of you, and Penny for quite a number of years now. It's really lovely to actually have you in our space, so thank you ever so much for being here. It's really great. Can I ask, are there bingos? I mean, like, the elephant in the room here, probably from the three of us, and the question I think that's kind of sitting there probably in the space is bingos that we experience collectively as childless people, regardless of our state of whether we're coupled or not. Clearly, we have them within our spaces too, as that we issue them, I suppose, as well, perhaps to people who are single and childless too. And I wondered if we might just spend a bit of time perhaps talking about our better actions and better kind of communication that we can put together, that we can share with in this episode to people and our listeners. Is that something you'd be comfortable to talk about?
Yeah, I don't mind. I think for me, yes, there's the childless bingos, but I'm not too much aware of the we as opposed to the I. But there are things like, if you're at work having a chat, it's the very much, what are you doing at the weekend? Well, whether that be we as a couple or we as a family, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going here, we're going there. And then you've got the after that as well. You know, what did you do at the weekend? We did this, we did that. Sometimes I find that quite triggering. You know, when you come home, you know, I come home to an empty house, and if you've had a tough day, that can be quite hard. You just want to come in and offload, and there is no one necessarily to do that. I think as well, what's quite triggering, people will say, you should have asked, or why didn't you say? And actually, that's quite hard when you're at home. You know, yes, all of my friends are married with children, or partnered with children. And that's really hard to ring up and say, hey guys, I'm having a bad day today. Do you fancy going here? Do you fancy going there? And then you get the, oh, sorry, we are doing this. Yes, I appreciate people have lives. yeah, it is quite hard to hear. But in general conversation, it's not something that worries me too much. It's just in the deeper conversations, it's a little bit harder.
I have to agree, Elaine, about that asking for help. I think that going from being in a couple where you have your person who will always be there for you want to go somewhere, you've got someone you can go with, you've got someone, and I talk about this one quite a lot, as the emergency contact. You've got someone who immediately someone asks the question, you don't even have to think about it. But when you don't, and you have to think about, oh, I've got to ask someone who wants to come to this with me, or who would be my emergency contact, or who do I ask for help from? It's a whole different, there's a not having to think about it and an automatic answer to putting a lot more emotional investment into reaching out and asking for help from someone. And it sounds really easy. And, Elaine, I totally get it when you say that people are like, oh, why didn't you just ask? Well, sometimes when you ask, it is uncomfortable. It's not always you aren't the first priority for a lot of people, just generally you're not. And that is the way it is. But if you're feeling in a emotional or a sensitive space, that's also really hard to hear from someone and be reinforced that you're not the number one priority for asking for that help. This exactly happened to me just about a year ago, when generally pretty good health, and I had a health scare and ended up in hospital on Christmas Day, and was in there for about 4 or 5 days. We were in lockdown here in Melbourne, so my family are in New Zealand, so they couldn't come across to be with me, or at all. So I had to go through this with those people that are close to me here, and I needed someone to come and stay. My good friend could only stay for a certain amount of time, and I was in that position of having to ask a new group who would do that, and they stepped up without a beat, and they came, and I had a week and a half of people in rotation coming to visit me or stay with me, and it was beautiful, and it was so heartening for me that I think I touched on before how much I've given back this year. I'm giving back into that community, because in that moment when I needed something that was very difficult for me to do, I felt very emotional about having to ask for that kind of help that they did. And my takeaway from that is people want to help. People are waiting to be I know I do. Like, I love it when someone asks me for help, and if I can, I will, because of that fact. Yeah. I want to add while I'm going that I just straight up just want to know those other people in my friend's life, just whether they're male or female. We have friends, and we want to know their friends. Their partner is also their friend. So yeah.
Going back to your emergency contact though, Penny, do you find your emergency contact will differ as to what the reason may be?
100%.
And how
I
you feel?
I go through a list of who would be appropriate for this occasion. Oh, this is an emergency contact for a charity walk. Oh, okay. That's probably not likely to be as important, and could be just someone another person who's on that walk. I'm in hospital. Well, it can't be someone overseas. And I remember going through this scenario of trying to work out who would be for a hospital visit, who was the most appropriate person, who would know my family's contact details if they needed to, who would know where to find my undies and my charger if I needed them to bring them into the hospital. It's quite, it has to be someone who's reasonably close to you to know those sorts of things too. And time changes all of that, Elaine. You think like over that period of the last 10, 20 years, who that person is who knows that information. For a single person, that has changed for me, a few times.
It's the important stuff as well, is who do you trust with? Where are all your documents? Where is your will? Where is everything in your house? That takes a lot of trust in someone that doesn't live with you or is not partnered with you. And yes, that can change over the years. And I think it depends on, as I say, what the situation is. If it is a charity walk, then, I can give someone's number, but that person may not be appropriate if I was taken into hospital. If it's a lot more of a personal nature, then my emergency contact might not be the person that I actually want involved. There isn't that one go-to person.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Totally agree. So it is working out, and that's the other bit. It comes back to having to go to reach out and have those conversations, which sometimes feel like are you going to be stepping a line, like asking someone that sense of breaching you're taking a step, you're taking a leap of faith to ask someone that you wouldn't normally feel like you would do. So yeah, there is a lot of taking those leaps of faith as a single person, asking for help on any number of things, and being told, why didn't you ask me? Well, I totally get that.
It's not as easy as that, is it?
No. I had a younger family member say once during a single phase, oh, aren't you lonely? And I thought, God, that hasn't come from, a 10-year-old. That's come from the adults. And I thought, why do you think, because my life, like I'm on my own, that I'm automatically lonely? Everyone can be lonely, whether they're single or not.
Yeah.
Some people can be lonelier in a relationship than on their own. And yes, sometimes I am lonely, but not because of, there might be something going on that in that moment you want someone to talk to about it. Elaine, I saw that you've got a cat, so you don't come home to an empty house. Can I just say that?
I've got two.
Do you?
Yeah.
And I debunk the whole like cat lady thing. I had a cat my cat's 10, and now I've got my dog Livy, who I hope you can't hear making a racket outside, who's 4, and they have become like my total stopgaps during the last period of COVID for talking to. I quite openly have conversations with them. I'm disappointed that they don't give me, or sometimes the advice that I want to hear. But they're very demanding friends, honestly. Anyway, a side note. But yeah, you're not coming home to an empty house was my point, Elaine.
Very true. It is nice, but it's something living that you come in back in the house to.
Yeah.
And if it is an animal, it's still something living that is happy to see you, welcomes you. I can come home and they're sitting on the drive waiting for me. And that means so much, doesn't it? Just something that's just happy to see you, especially after a tough day.
Another heartbeat in the house. Yeah,
absolutely, that's right. And during COVID, it was all families. The talk was all about families. Lots of Zoom calls came into their own. Lots of children in the background, partners dipping in, dipping out, that kind of thing. And I worked right through COVID. I was nursing COVID patients, and I would come home and, after a tough day, I might want someone to speak to, or not speak to, but just have that, just put your pajamas on, have a hot bath, put your pajamas on, stick on a movie, and just snuggle on the sofa with. you don't need to say anything, but that's not there. But you know, I can come home and have a snuggle with an Oscar or an Otis, so that's good to me.
How did you find it during lockdown, Elaine, as far as being able to have people a community to talk to? Like, did you have a very big Zoom group? Like, I know that was great for me. I love doing the Zooms for catch-ups, for being able to talk to people. Did you get that?
Well, I wasn't part of Gateway during COVID. I hadn't had my surgery by then, so but I did go to work every day. I was working with palliative patients that were dying of COVID. Would come home, and the way we got through basically was we set up a WhatsApp group that was NHS people. So I think it's a bit like being lonely, as we were saying, you can be lonely in a couple. A friend of mine is married with children, and another she's a nurse, and another friend of mine that's a nurse is separated but has a child. But my friend that was married would go home and want to offload to her husband, but he didn't understand at all because he's not there. He wasn't seeing what we were seeing, so he had nothing to relate to. So that's how we glued really well during that time, as just people to sound off against, and just, whether it was have a cry or just be silent together if need be. But yeah, the weekends were tough, and your days off were tough. Because, you know, you heard of the whole thing, didn't you, about, oh, as a family it was great, we went off and did this, we went and did that, and we've been cooking together, and you think, oh, what am I going to do? So yeah, Zoom calls came into their own, but again, a lot of people were like, oh, I can't do that because we're doing something with the children or with my partner. So I find it really, really isolating.
I was thinking about that before I came on, that I was feeling a little sensitive perhaps about talking about this topic, because it is something that there isn't a voice for, a very strong voice for it. I know that Jodie speaks very well to it because that was her story, but lost my trail of thought. But I came into this community coupled, and to me that's really important, because I felt that I had never I'd gone through what I thought was my grief in my 30s significantly, and for a much longer period of time when I was single, because it was not by choice. It didn't happen for me. I didn't find my partner. I made some decisions about going into and looking at IVF on my own, got to a certain point and decided that that wasn't the right thing for me personally. But having done that, and then in my, early to mid 40s, meeting someone, and I fell pregnant and had a miscarriage, I suddenly had words. I had an experience that I could talk to, that people, and I know that people say, we don't talk about miscarriages enough, but there's still a conversation out there. There is a conversation, because even people who have miscarriages go on to have children. So there's a wider group of people who are in that cohort that have this experience. And I found that was my voice. I found my voice through that experience, but I kept falling back to the fact that was an experience that happened within a short period of time. But where it wasn't until I had a conversation with Steph from World Childless Week that I even learnt the term disenfranchised grief, and realized that's what happened in my 30s. This community gave me those words. And I thought what I really went through in the elongated period of grief and frustration and not knowing what on earth I was going through and why did I feel like I was so disconnected from what was happening with my friends. That tough bit was when I was single and in my late 30s, and realizing that I could see the wall coming, and I was coming hurtling at it thinking, I'm gonna, smash into this and I've got nothing. What on earth am I doing? Which is where I made some choices about, okay, I'm going to look at IVF on my own. And so for me, it felt like I got some control back. And I but I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't even think that there were other people to talk to at that time. So when I had the miscarriage, found the community and started talking more, I really felt like I wanted to talk to that experience of being in my 30s and single, because that's what I didn't hear. That's where I felt the most lost, and that there was no voices for me to listen to. So and I don't know how that happens, how we make that louder, but I was really pleased that it was acknowledged this year with World Childless Week, and we had that conversation. I know that you guys have done a topic before about, I think, single during the COVID period, which was awesome. But yeah, I want that voice to be louder of the single experience, and that we're probably a larger cohort than the IVF, those who are childless by circumstance, and not having met someone, or just never had the opportunity to try, or have never been able to from different medical reasons. That we generally as a society talk about the IVF because there was an attempt to, and I know that people feel like if I was to talk about it, what have I got to talk about? I just, there's not that tangible thing. Like I didn't go through IVF. I don't understand that process up until the point that I did look at it and then stopped. But I didn't go through. I don't know what it's like to try to fall pregnant. So am I not really have I failed even at that point? Like we're part of the same group, but there's so much talk about being not having success with IVF, and it's terrible, the experience that people have. But I haven't got that comparison to even make. And the fact that having a miscarriage was my entry of something to talk to. And can I tell you, I told everyone. I was like, I had a voice and I got to share it, because I felt so isolated before in my 30s, not having, just kind of sitting going, I have no idea what's happening to me, that I suddenly had this slight door, that something to say, and I just let everything out. Like it was like more than probably I needed, but it was because there was probably all this unresolved stuff from my 30s being single that was coming into it as well, that I just needed somewhere to share it and let the world know, hey, this stuff happened to me. And while you were all, everyone has stuff that's going on, but because it's you feel like it's much bigger. I was going through all this stuff, and nobody knew what was happening to me, because we don't talk about it. And I don't know, Elaine, so that makes me super impressed, Elaine, that you've done this off the back of and later in life that you've had the courage to talk about it, I think is phenomenal.
I'm talking about it now. I haven't in the past. I think it was something that was always very buried. But I've never been pregnant. I've not miscarried, and I did the Wave of Light last night with Gateway, Lighthouse Women, which was amazing. And hands up, I was in absolute bits last night. But there were people that were grieving lost children and miscarriages, and I thought, I haven't been there. Do I have a right to be here? But I was still grieving what I haven't had, what I can't have. It is that disenfranchised grief. And I have recently, and I think that's why I'm talking about it now. I was the one that hit the wall running, and I was just completely overwhelmed by it all. And not only the grief of childlessness, but I think the grief of being single. I was asked by a friend if I would go shopping with her one day. Great, I'm a woman, I love shopping. But it was for her daughter's wedding, to shop for a wedding hat. Yeah, of course I will, no problem. Until I walked into the shop, and I don't even know what went through my head, but I just stopped and I went, but I never gave my mum this honour, this privilege. And then it led on to, I never gave my dad the honour of walking me down the aisle. And then I just stopped again and thought, this is exactly the same as my childlessness grief. It's grieving for something that you haven't had and something that you never can have. Yes, I can get married, but I can't give that to my parents now. They're not here, it's too late. So yeah, I'm coming out of it now, and it helps to talk about it. So I think it's time I found my voice.
I think we're very quick, aren't we, to put labels on things. I'm just listening to both of you and just acknowledging that I'm listening to both of you as someone who has, as you both know, gone through IVF, and hearing you and acknowledging your words, because I think, Penny, there is so much in what you said about, yes, you have an experience like a miscarriage gives you a way in, and that's just exceptionally wrong. And I know I've had this conversation with Steph and with other people too about when people arrive in this community through a circumstance, not through a, Sarah, you'll know the words better than I do. I always turn to you for the right words in this, but it's a circumstance as opposed to, I don't want to say an incident, because that's not what miscarriage, it's not what IVF, it's not what failed pregnancy in some form is, or a loss, but by a circumstance driven by things that are out of our control as well, by things that not meeting the right person, by circumstance of life, by whatever that might be. And goodness knows there's loads of them. I know that Jodie Day speaks about the 50 ways not to be a mother, and majority of those aren't anything to do with miscarriage. They're nothing to do with IVF. They're just two things. And there are other things, and most of those are driven by things we can't control in our lives. And I just want to acknowledge that. And thank you just for bringing that up, Penny. I think it is so important to talk about that too. That there can be almost like a disenfranchisement within our own community when we don't say something or talk about this more. And we certainly learned from the previous episode when we were talking again about lockdown. And Elaine, I can't begin to imagine what you have been through in your capacity at work, but also just going through that experience of nursing other people. And that whole family narrative was so flipping strong, wasn't it, during COVID. It still is, I think, I'm not going into too much from the politics, but certainly, politically in this country, certainly it's all very much family, and the definition of family, as we all know, is the children, even if that's not necessarily mentioned, it's the implication. And it's the labeling, isn't it? We do it, and we're victims of it ourselves as a community, but also within our community, we try and define things and put labels on things. And actually, what I've learned in all of the podcast episodes from our guests and from the listeners as well is that we can't label stuff. We can't label our circumstance. It's too vast. Childlessness is a contentious word in itself, because I maintain that everyone I've met is more, not less, for what they've been through. But it's the term that we tend broadly to be, again, a label we're defined by. And that's sometimes not good enough, is it?
I was wondering if I could ask you both something, because obviously I work with our community, and I have this real felt sense sometimes when I'm working with people that obviously there's my story and there's a whole list of stuff, and then I sometimes get this sense when people are single that they feel that they're not worthy, that they've not been through enough or anything to justify being part of this community. I was wondering if it's not too painful, if you'd be able to talk a little bit about that, because I always feel that people, regardless of how they get here, it's not top trumps. It's not, oh, well, you've been through more, therefore you are, you sit up here. But I was wondering what that kind of that felt sense is amongst people who feel at the moment they're not being properly seen, or don't have that that sort of joint voice yet, because you are the majority of our community. You genuinely are. That the stats back that up.
It's a really good question, Sarah. And how do I feel? I think I said before that I felt a little like coming into this, how would I feel about talking? And I really wanted to be as honest as I could without feeling like it's not a difference between couple and single, and then it makes comes some kind of shift between it. But and I don't even want to say but, however, there is this experience of talking about things that are often coming from being a couple, whereas the situations where you're single are, how much can you talk about, how many things are there to be said, where even I feel like, well, you just need to pull your socks up and get on with it. Yeah, things, you didn't find someone, you didn't have a child, and it's not the life that you thought or intended, but you just need to get on with it. Because I come from, I'm Gen X, I come from the baby boomers who were all about, getting on with it. Yes, they were about getting on with it, but they were also the ones who were, everything was about finding a partner and having children. I'm surrounded by, in my growing up, that was the only choice that I had. So when that wasn't happening for me and I was failing, I didn't think that I could talk to anybody, because I was like, who was I going to talk to? This is everyone is aiming for this, golden chalice. And I just didn't feel like I had a voice to talk about it. For your point, Sarah, I didn't even think about going and talking to someone like you, because I didn't even know what I was going to talk about. I couldn't even identify for myself what was going on. Elaine's just having this conversation now at 50. I'm nearly 50, and it's only really in the last 3 years. So for the majority of time, I never had a voice to talk about it, or thought that I had one, or thought that I had something to talk about that would be worthy of a conversation. So yeah, 100%. I feel like I feel a bit silly. I would have felt, a bit silly talking about it 4 or 5 years ago, that, yeah, so life didn't turn out. And that's how I would think that people would be like, yeah, and okay, next, there's other things, but that's where I feel like we don't give enough credence to the grief that we go through as being single and not having an opportunity in our whole life that we had thought we would have, and all the turns and the ceremonies and milestones that we would get through that. None of it happens. Just the same as if you were a couple, that's the same experience. But same as a single, we also just at the beginning didn't find the couple to start it off with. So yeah, you feel like if you talk about it, it sounds like it's a failure, and that's the hard bit to say. I failed at that, and I tend to, because of that, I overcompensate, and we'll talk about all the great things that happen from my single life, and the choices that I get to make, and the things that I get to do whenever at my choice and my leisure when I want to. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't really shit not having the opportunity to be able to talk about it when I wanted to, when I really needed to.
And I think I've had therapy in the past, but I think, like you, I didn't know what to voice. I just knew there was something. I just knew I wasn't happy and something was distressing me, but I didn't know what that was. There was nothing tangible that I could say, but I just felt I'd failed. But I think, finding your voice, I now can say what I'm not happy with. I can say, actually, it's quite tough being on your own. And I think I'm beginning to come out of that now, because I am starting to talk about it. And I think that's what you need to do. But I've done a lot of meetups now, with other childless women and single women and women in partnerships. But it's never an issue. That's what's lovely. Everyone is accepted for who they are and what they are. You can sit there having coffee or lunch or whatever, and if you want to tell your story, then that's fine. And if you don't, that's fine too. You're still accepted for who you are. And I just think that's lovely. I come away feeling really quite nourished from meetups. So yeah, it's nice just for it not to matter now.
I always say, after a really good catch up with the girls in that community here in Melbourne, that my cup is always filled after a really good catch up, and I
Perfect
feel
way to
it.
put it.
Yeah, and I can come away, and that will sustain me for a period of time, and it feels good. Like, I know that where at times where I've felt isolated, and I wasn't getting that, it's like anything in life. When you're feeling crappy, you shut the doors and you hunker down and you stop seeing people and doing the things that you need to do. And that when you get to meet up and do those things with people, how much it does nourish you and fill your cup. So I've been very aware of that in this last year, of just how good it is to have community and share and do stuff with them. Elaine?
I think for me, in the last 6 months even, what's changed for me is that, yes, we can get out there now and we can meet up with people, but through the community, I've befriended 3 other single women, and we have a minimum of a weekly Zoom call now. 2 of them I physically met, 1 I haven't, but that doesn't matter. There's no barriers there. And it is normally you would just, okay, I'm having a really tough day today. And you would just close the curtains and go to bed and hanker down, and that's you done. But we don't now. It would message, guys, I'm having a bad day, and then right, let's Zoom call. And they all have the same outlook from a single perspective, and it may be nothing to do with that. It's just that you might have come home and said to a partner, oh, this happened today and I'm really upset about it. You have your community now, and they get it. So it opened up a new world for me.
I love that. So there's a real sense then that communities, I guess for people that are single, you need that kind of chosen family, if you like. So people that you can check in with, and people that are going to be there and get it, rather than somebody that says, oh, I can't right now because I've got to do X, Y, and Z.
That's exactly right. And there are people who understand. So I can catch up with women in this community, and it's those probably that are single that I have extra connection with, or more. I don't want to say I understand more, but there is our way of life at this time, in this season, is matches more. But I say that, and then just this last week I went to see some old neighbours who are a couple maybe 10 years older than me, who've had their kids, they've grown up, and I had the best night, and that was a total filled my cup, because they saw me as a human being who wanted to, was sharing. I've lived across the road from them for 12 years, and we just got to share stories and commonalities that reminded me, of the community outside, the bigger world that's outside of this community. Because I did realize at the end of COVID that I had spent an awful lot of time just kind of totally immersed myself in the childless community, and that at some point, because COVID was finishing, I was going to have to integrate myself back into the wider world of seeing other people and hearing conversations and being ready for some of the comments and stuff that would happen, that I was a bit nervous about, because I'd got so used to having catch-ups with people since I've come out. I call it my coming out. Since I come out, that was not you could say all of those things about if you wanted to, about living a single childless life, that they would understand completely. But then you go out into the gen pop, I call it, general population, and you're got to be ready for other things, that comments and stuff will come back again, and what happens then. Yeah,
That's like a real sense then. It's like within a community within the community of single women fills your cup up, and then slowly you can go out into gen pop, which I adore. I love that. I'm stealing that. And you are kind of you know where to go to recharge your batteries, if you like, if you have a not so positive experience.
100%. And it's knowing where you can get that from. But that's human beings. We all kind of gravitate to people, and it could be anywhere. It could be, I've got an older guy around the corner who I stop and say hi to with my dog, and just the joy that he gets out of saying hi to Livy is part of what makes my day. We get it from all kinds of places, but that reliability of having people that, Elaine, with the Zoom, with the 4 of you, like, that reliability is really important, knowing that that's something that you can count on. Or if I've gone quiet for a couple of days, someone will reach out and go, hey, what's up? What's going on? And just knowing that, it's really important.
It is. It's just knowing they're there, isn't it? You don't want to be in everyone's pockets all the time, but you can just reach out, and then you just, yeah, if they are quiet for a few days, hey guys, you okay? But you know they're there for you, and that means the world, doesn't it?
It does.
I think that's reassuring, I think, to the wider community as well, childless community, who may all feel that we perhaps stick our feet in it sometimes, I think, with the conversation, but to know that we're actually part of that healing process with you is a really lovely thing. And yeah, I also love Gen Pop. Yeah, but it's it's giving that confidence, isn't it? I think you sort of find sort of being able to sort of have those conversations and get some reassurance together, learning together from each other as well. Is there anything you'd like to see in the community? If you had a request, one of you for something, or both of you rather, for something that you wanted to happen, a change that you wanted to see, what would that be?
I'd like to see more confidence and conversations coming from the single in the group, so that we do hear, and that comes out into the open, so that people behind us can see that that is a legitimate experience and grief that we go through, and it's not just having gone through, a procedure or trying, or that guarantees you a spot as a childless person, that you've gone through something as a single, into your grief is just as legitimate as the person next to you.
How about you, Elaine? Have you got any wishes?
Well, I think we spoke about this, Sarah, a little while ago. This is a real wacky thing out there, but I think that the childless women community should integrate with the childless men community. Singles. That would be great.
I remember you talking about this. We were sort of talking about this safe dating agency, wasn't it? That's the kind of context.
Full stop dating, it could be, couldn't it?
Oh my goodness, mate. Yeah, we could. Would you like to?
Can you help, Michael?
I was going to say, Elaine, you could be the CEO of the
Right.
dating agency.
We may have to bring you to this.
Well, you know what? You laugh, but I think that's a bloody good idea. Because
how many singles have you got in your men's group, Michael?
Quite a few.
There you go.
Quite a few.
You're Elaine.
And
are they all over the world, Michael?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yep. So we are global. America, Europe, Australia, quite a lot of Australia, Zimbabwe, Thailand,
Kent.
Probably.
Yeah, the wilds of Kent.
Probably.
Yeah, very exotic around here.
But listening, I think the silence that Berenice, Sarah, and myself have shown is that we realise this is a big topic that needs to be talked about. When we first did this, 2019, we were, quite gobsmacked about it. It was quite an education. It is, from our stats, it is one of the highest listened to episodes. So it is. What I can tell you is that all those things that you feel are reflected in the men's group that we have as well. Mm-hmm. So they talk about feeling of failure, because, like you say, Penny, that golden chalice that we apparently need to subscribe to. they're the same. Elaine, I don't think that what you've actually said is a bad thing at all, because there are a lot of single men out there who, want to meet someone.
On a serious note, at our age, the chances of us meeting somebody who is childless is probably not a very high percentage.
No.
And whereas, okay, meeting somebody who has got children can bring a whole new dimension to your life. I understand the challenges that would go with that as well. But it doesn't stop us. I still want to meet people and go to the cinema with someone and, go on holiday, that kind of thing, see the world. That doesn't stop because I haven't got children.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can meet someone that has that same point of view, then that would be fantastic.
Yeah,
absolutely. Can I add something in just on this topic of dating, because I think it's an awesome idea, Elaine, but I want to give another side to that, is that when I've gone from being a couple to single, there's a painful period where you go through the change of being in a couple to being single. But there's also an element of I really enjoy being single too. There's good things that I really love about it, and then I'll get to a place where I think, oh no, I'd like to do something and share time with people or a person. But I almost find it offensive. Offensive feels like such a strong word when people say, oh, you would look at are you dating? Are you on a site? Oh, my husband, I wish my husband had a brother that was just perfect for you. Mm-hmm. And I think, no, by saying that, all I hear is, I'm not okay as I am. That's what it feels like. And I go, I don't need to have I'm not looking. If I was looking, then I'd be having that conversation and you'd know that, oh yeah, I'm looking, and that's awesome. I've got some terrific dating stories, and I have great fun when I'm in that place, and that season is here for me. But right now, and I'm in a place where I don't want to have someone else right now. That doesn't mean I don't think it's an awesome idea, Elaine. I do. I think it's great because it even piques my interest of someone who is childless, who's had the same experience and who hasn't necessarily felt like they're or has felt like people have looked at them and gone, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? You haven't got kids and you haven't got a partner. Must be something wrong with you. Or people say to you about, as women, because we're both women, about guys who haven't been married or who haven't got kids. Red flag. Yeah. Wonder what's going on there. And I think, well, then you're saying the same thing about me. I've not been married. I've not had kids. So what red flags are you raising about me? And I laugh, but I'm not laughing because it's offensive. So I don't, in our good time, if we want to, it's an awesome idea. Bring it on. But just remember that it's not necessarily for everyone at this point in time where they're at. Yeah. Yeah.
So I've got a question, because Bear and Lee stole the one I was going to ask about what would you like to see change. So, I'm very mindful. I'm quite privileged here to be in a company of 4 women having a conversation about this. So I want to ask you both, how do I not put, how do I not, or how do guys not put their foot in their mouth, you know, by coming up with those bingos we talked about before? Like, I'm quite trepidatious about what to say here because it's not my lived experience. And so what sort of language should I be using when, you know, when we talk around this subject, or not to trigger you? Does that make sense?
I totally understand what you're saying. And I think for me, it's never a straightforward answer because it's just like a child just being childless. There's so many different things and different places that people are at in that journey, that you feel different things will trigger different people at different times, and it might trigger one person, it might not trigger the next person. The same could be said for me as a single person, that something that might have really triggered me a year ago, I might not even notice today. So it's that's not really helpful at all. Sorry, Michael.
So what was
Michael.
the first thing that come to your mind when I said that?
I thought, you know, when you first started, I thought you were going to say that you were really privileged to be in a loving relationship before you said that you were really privileged to be in a room full of 4 women, which was beautiful that you said that. And I was about to start feeling like, oh, you know, and that would have been, but you didn't do it. What you did was you said that you were in, and it gave, without you even knowing, I felt like an extra sense of, that was a beautiful thing to say, Michael. So I think that some people are just good at, some people are just good at reading a room and knowing what to say, and some people will say the wrong thing and not know it. And I think we as individuals know when someone says something that was felt to us with intent, or it wasn't meant with any intent, and that we might be able to say something. And we're here, you know, Elaine and I are here talking because we obviously feel comfortable about it, are more likely to say something. I hope, you know, I'm still working on that strength in this space of being single. But it's a tricky one. Elaine, I don't know. Did you think of something?
Well, I did, but I've got a menopausal brain and it's just gone.
Sorry.
It's fine. Oh dear. Bad, isn't it?
Oh, I recognise that. Menopausal brain.
Too. Honestly, I do. I think there's an awful lot about men and about safety, isn't there, as well, though? It's a topic that comes up so often. And about just, I think, you know, just keeping safe and being mindful of behaviours as well. But that's all men, not just childless men and women. It's the safety and being, just there's so much stuff that I think the privilege sometimes, and this is kind of digressing completely, but I think that kind of privilege of being able to walk down the street at night, like my running route and my walking route changes as soon as the clocks go and change here, because can't go and do that again because I'm going out on my own unless I take Molly, my dog, with me. I don't do that then. You know, those sorts of strange things, and they're kind of like behaviors that are so really hard to discuss or share, because actually I think horribly so, women have got used to kind of reacting to those kind of situations, and maybe we don't always recognize it sometimes, that we're adapting because of the threats that are out there. I'm digressing into a much bigger picture about women's safety, but I think that being safe and being mindful of keeping a safe space and holding it is so important. I think we do it better in our community because we're used to the threats that we get, but equally, you know, there's always room for improvement, but also room, I think, for sharing knowledge and and out there, because I think we've got an awful lot of lessons in the childless community that would impart very well to people who don't identify as childless. They're quite
I
wide.
think on the subject of safety as well, I'm very conscious as a single person. If I decide this afternoon to take myself off to London, wherever, nobody knows where I am.
Yeah.
And I find that quite unnerving sometimes. If something happened, nobody knows where I am. Yeah, it's quite a sobering thought, really. But going back to what Michael was saying, is there anything? I don't think anyone says anything that would triggering out of with intent to say that. I think it obviously depends what's said and how the person that you're saying to at that point in time is, what place they're in, how they're feeling. It's not nothing specific that I would take as I can't say A or B. It just depends how I feel that day. But I guess that's the same with everybody and lots of situations, really.
I had a thought as Berenice was talking, actually, that because you already have the sense of the bigger picture of failing because you're single and you haven't got kids, that I would be much more likely, if something was said, coming back to your question, Michael, to do with being single, I would probably say, oh no, that's okay, or let it pass, because for me to bring it up or say, I wouldn't even think, my first reaction wouldn't be to go, oh, that was wrong, because I've been ingrained into thinking that I'm the bottom of the food chain. And what I know, that sounds really wrong, but it's not even, it's like this on the surface, you're going, yeah, oh no, don't worry about it, it's okay. But in actual fact, that's where we as singles, we need to be stronger to say what our voice is and what is right and wrong. That we probably haven't figured that out yet. Like, we don't know a lot of that stuff, like we don't even realize that we're holding our keys, in our hand with the key pointing out for protection, because it's just something that we do. Just as singles, we've got so used to things being said or done that we let it slide, that actually all of those little things add up, and that's what makes it difficult, extra difficult being single as well as not having kids. That if we stopped and went, hang on, we've got just as much voice here, some of those things aren't right. We've moved 40 years ago, there was so much of the behavior of women having to be in the home, and that they would rear the children. We've come a long way from that, and changes of behavior and equality, but we're not thinking about that yet, I don't think, from the childless and single experience. So yeah, I think that voice, and that's why perhaps I see so many more couples who are talking, because it comes from a place of, you've had an experience, or you've got a support in the home that you can come back to and talk to, that you can have those intimate, share those intimate moments that have happened, because you've conferred and then got a confidence to share it. Whereas, something now from a single point of view, I don't have that. As much as I love my cat and dog, they're not telling me, no, go for it, Penny. That's definitely wrong. You should say something about that. That has to come from within. That has to be something that if I happen to, talk about it with someone else, and now I've got more people that I can do that with. But yeah, I think that was a long answer for Michael. There are probably things that I should be able to share with you, but I've yet to identify them for myself and be aware of what they are, because we just haven't developed that voice. I haven't developed that voice yet.
I'd like to think I understand in that perspective, because one of the things that that I see in a men's group is that it's almost like we're developing our vocabulary right now about how it feels to be a childless man. So that's how I'm sort of getting the relationship there between the two. So I like to think I understand. What about you, Elaine?
I think you are. I can from that verbal. I think that's recognizing what I'm trying to say with many words, elongated, getting it out eventually.
It's been so lovely hearing you both speak. Genuinely. I mean, it's you're right. It's a huge part of our community, but at the moment there's not that cohesive voice that's kind of. I had the word. It's a word Michael uses a lot. Advocating. It's not there yet. You haven't got that I guess that vocabulary and that cohesive voice to kind of go, well, actually, this is an issue, and we're going to start standing up for ourselves because this isn't good enough. And I really get that sense, that being at the bottom of the pile. As I say, when I work with people that are single and childless, that comes through so strong. Like, should I be here? Am I worthy enough to be here? I've not got a list of things that have happened. Almost like you have to have this like tick box, when the reality isn't. We're all in the same club, aren't we? The same community. Doesn't mean you're here. You've got to be here. You've got to jump over a certain number of hoops to be worthy enough to be here. I think everybody's here because they are, joined by that one reason. So thank you.
Different boats. That's the way I look at it. Yeah.
But thank you so much for sharing. Really,
thank you, Penny.
So lovely to hear you both.
Yeah,
thank you very much for inviting us, inviting me, and giving me the opportunity to share a part of my story. I really do appreciate it, and it's lovely to be able to see you guys and have the conversation.
Thank you, Elaine. A particularly warm welcome to you, because we did you and I know each other. We've spoken before in different spaces, but yet to have the privilege to meet you. And I know
lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh no, it's just lovely to have you here, and we just love new voices as well. All voices, but it's particularly, I think, immeasurably courageous of you to come here and to talk to us today and to give up some time on your Sunday. Just generally very, very lovely to have you in our space. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. I know we've both met, but nice to meet you, Michael, finally.
It's lovely to meet you too, Elaine.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found Penny and Elaine as amazing as we did. We'd love to hear from you if you were equally blown away by them. If you want to find out more about Penny, you can find her at www.thechildlesswanderer.com, and Elaine is very active in the Lighthouse Women's community, so you can find her in there. If you'd like to find out more about our podcast, or you have a great idea for a topic we've not covered, or you just want more of, we'd love to hear from you. We want this podcast to have as many voices from across our community as possible. So if something's missing, or you just want a deeper dive on it, let us know. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn, and we have a YouTube channel as well, along with our website, which is at www.thefullstoppod.com. You can sign up to our listeners list at the website, which keeps you up to date on what we're up to, and if you'd like to, you can also donate to our work too. As always, it's important to us to remind you, you're not alone.
What are you thinking about right now?
I was just thinking about the full stop dating site, if I'm honest.
You've got yourself a new job.
I might have done, yeah.
Your CEO.
Are you writing your profile in your head?
Yeah.
we love that. It's brilliant.
I think I'm actually going to put that funny bit right at the end, because we like to put a bit of funny at the end. And I'm thinking